How did watching that make you feel? Terrified, scared, excited, nervous, maybe some less family-friendly words used to describe when you see things like that. It's probably fair to say that sharks don't have a great reputation. Most people will never see a shark. Most of the information they get about them might come from somewhere like the media, maybe a newspaper article, maybe even that film that you're now all thinking about. When I first started getting involved working with sharks, I noticed very quickly that when media do an article about a shark, the language is always done with a lot of fear, and there's a lot of words like terrifying, and they seem to be missing out a lot of what is actually going on when you start learning a little bit more about shark behavior. A lot of what's missing is the context of what that shark is actually doing. Let me give you two headlines. Grizzly bear savagely attacks hiker. Female bear protects her cubs from reckless traveler. The thing that you're feeling there is context. That's the difference. And that's what I feel sharks are very, very rarely given. What I'd like to do today is to help fill in some of those gaps so that when we look at shark behavior, it actually makes a little bit more sense, especially when we look at the shark's interactions with people. My name is Dan, and the last few years I've been working as an underwater cinematographer. This is me with some beautiful lemon sharks in the Bahamas. I've also filmed other marine life, including turtles, sea snakes, orcas, American alligators. But it's the sharks is the one that I have always been passionate about. Since I was a young kid, I would always draw pictures of them, read fact files, watch as many documentaries as I possibly could. That was the one that always had a deep-seated fascination inside me. I never really did anything about it until fairly recently. January 2014, I bought a plane ticket to go to South Africa. I was going to just go and visit a friend and do some of the touristy bits, but secretly, the real reason was that South Africa is a hotspot for great white sharks. So I wanted to go and see these animals for the first time. I booked myself onto a cage diving boat, and we headed out around dawn. This is a place a couple of hours outside of Cape Town. And after a few hours, the sharks started turning up. Now, there was a few screams of excitement from the other guests that, like me, had never seen a great white shark before, although I stayed relatively calm. I'm not someone that screams very much, but for me, it was a much more amazing experience of seeing this animal that I'd been fascinated by my entire life and just confirmed for me how amazing they really are. I was supposed to stay on that boat for one day. I stayed for 7 because I was finding it absolutely fascinating learning about these sharks' behavior each day. And then 2 weeks later, when I got home, something in me had changed. I could no longer go on just doing my normal life, which my normal life is a freelance drummer. I've been working as a drummer for about 10 years, so my normal life is perhaps not that normal. But that wasn't enough anymore. Now that sharks had entered my life, I had to do something about it. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. So for the next few months, I was trying to figure out how to turn this passion into something a little bit more. And I found myself an internship program, again in South Africa, and in October 2014, headed back out again for 2 months. Now, this program was perfect for me because you didn't need any scientific background, or you didn't need to be studying marine biology to get in. You just needed to be passionate. Ideal. Now, because of my other job of working with as a drummer, I direct a drum show that tours around the UK. I've gotten quite good at social media, working on engagement and building your audience, things like that. So I decided that was going to be my in. Fortunately for me, this cage diving operator that I was going to go and do an internship program with was terrible at social media. So on the first night, I took over all their social media. I then started implementing new ways for their clients to receive the conservation message, and then started up a few side projects at the same time. And after those 2 months, they gave me a job. In March 2015, I headed back out again to be their conservation and media manager, and that's when I developed more of an understanding of shark behavior, and also where I started learning how to be an underwater cinematographer. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce you to some of these sharks that I've gotten to know quite well. But before I do that, what I want to really put forward is that every single one of these sharks you're going to meet today has its own unique personality. Just like dogs and cats, that we all know obviously have personalities, sharks, and I don't mean different species, I mean individual sharks, have their own unique personalities. They all behave in their own separate ways. The way one shark might approach a situation might be completely different how the next shark approaches that situation. First one I'm going to introduce you to is Shredder. Shredder, I actually met earlier on this year. We don't name her Shredder because she goes around shredding everything, as you might expect. She's actually named Shredder because, as you'll see from the still image now, the back of her dorsal fin is slightly cut up. About 8 months ago, it was far worse than this. We presume it was probably a boat propeller. Now, Shredder's personality is very, very calm. She's a very chilled-out shark. In fact, she takes quite a lot of time to figure out how she's going to interact with something. And that means that when she's around our boat, she usually stays for several hours. She's interested in what's going on. This is Sweetheart. Now, we name her Sweetheart not just because she is a sweetheart, but also because of the heart shape that you can see on the bottom of her dorsal fin. This is a birthmark. It's been there her entire life. Now, Sweetheart, again, a very calm and very curious shark. She'll often display a behavior which is known as spy hopping. Spy hopping is very simple. It's just where a shark will lift its head above the water or just tilt its eye above the surface to have a better look at its surroundings. Killer whales will do a similar thing. Great white sharks are the only shark species that do this. Their eye works just as well above the surface as it does below. There was one occasion where I was standing on the back of the boat chumming. Chumming is just the mashup of sardines and fish oils that we use to bring the sharks closer to the area. So I had a little scoop, and I was taking a big scoop of chum, turned round to drop it in the water, and there was Sweetheart with her head out of the water up to her gills, looking straight at me. Yeah. Now, she had come up so silently that all the other little fish around the back of the boat that were kind of picking up all the scraps hadn't noticed her either. They were still doing their thing. I know that she was looking at me because I could see both her eyes on the side of her head pointing forwards. Great white sharks actually have blue eyes, not black eyes, as most people presume. I, of course, was trying to get everyone else's attention to see if they had noticed what had just happened. She hung there in the water for what was probably only a couple of seconds before dropping down and heading off around the side of the boat. When you have an encounter with a wild animal, it's a pretty amazing thing. Like if a squirrel runs up to you in the park, it's quite cool. When it's a 2.5-meter great white shark, it's something that stays with you for quite a while. Two things really hit me. One, that I know she was looking at me, but also that she had come up so quietly, she wasn't being aggressive. She hadn't responded to a feeding response or anything like that. She was interested. She was looking above the water because she wanted to find out what was happening. Another behavior that we see from some juvenile sharks is what's known as bumping, as you'll see in this video. This young shark is going to swim straight towards our cage and quite literally bump it with its snout. Sharks have lots of sensors in their noses, and they use those to, again, explore their environment. But there's another behavior that I find even more fascinating, especially when we start talking about sharks and humans, and it's this one. This is what scientists call mouthing. Mouthing is where a shark will put its jaws over the side of an object to try and feel what it's made of. They do this with the same bite force that we have in our own human bite, so it's not very much for a shark. The first thing I want you to notice about this image is this shark's eye is wide open. You might have seen images of great whites when they're hunting their prey or jumping in the air like that video at the beginning, and what looks like a white eye. Great white sharks don't have eyelids. So to protect their eyes, which are of course very important to them, they actually roll them into the back of their heads for a split second just on that moment of impact. This shark's eye is wide open. She's not attacking, she's looking. She's curious, she's interested. The other thing to note is that not every shark will do this. This shark, however, has done it every time I've ever seen her. This is a very special shark. This is Trix. Trix is the largest shark I ever saw in Mossel Bay, well over 4 meters. She's also the slowest moving, most calm, and most curious shark I've ever seen in my life. Trix is a mouther. She gets interested by her environment, and she uses the only tool that she has to explore. So what does it look like? A 4+ meter great white shark mouthing our cage? Well, it looks a little bit like this.
Ja!
Alla Trix! Hej! Det är precis.
Something we never told our clients was that if a shark that size really wanted to take that cage apart, there would be nothing we could do about it. You're on your own. But hopefully, as you're watching that video, you're not seeing an aggressive shark trying to bite through those bars. Actually, what you're seeing there is a very calm behavior from a curious animal. Mouthing gets really interesting when we start thinking about when sharks interact with people. You might have heard of mistaken identity, where a shark sees a person, a swimmer or surfer, on the surface, thinks that it's its own food, a seal or a sea lion, and then approaches and maybe even attacks that swimmer or surfer, thinking it's its food. When great white sharks attack their prey, they do that around 30 miles an hour from the bottom, hitting their prey at the surface with so much force, it takes their prey down in one hit, just like that video at the very beginning. If a great white shark saw a surfer or swimmer on the surface and thought that it was its own food and made a mistake, wouldn't it make sense for that shark to then attack that surfer or swimmer in exactly the same way it does with a seal or a sea lion? Nothing about that situation would be different to the shark. And yet, we hardly ever hear about great white sharks breaching on people. In fact, when we hear about sharks biting people in general, we hear of them losing maybe an arm or a leg. Okay, that's painful. But if a great white shark was going to breach on a person, I think you would be losing slightly more than an arm or a leg. Never mind the teeth, we would not be able to survive the impact that they hit their prey with at the surface, which to me suggests mouthing is a much more reasonable explanation as to why a shark might bite a person. Now, when you think about how many thousands and thousands of people are in the water every single day in areas where we know there are sharks hunting, they have so many opportunities to make these mistakes. And yet, every year, between 5 and 10 people are killed around the world by sharks. Last year, it was 5. When you put that into some kind of context, every year around the world, over 700 people are killed by toasters. In the area where we work in Mossel Bay, where all the images that I've shown you today were taken, we work in an area called Seal Island, home to about 4,000 Cape Fur seals. That's why the sharks are there. 800 meters away is a beach where people do go swimming, surfing. You might see someone walking their dog on a Sunday morning. And people do swim there and surf there very, very regularly. There has never in history been an attack on a swimmer or surfer at that beach. I think sharks know what their food is. We simply haven't been around long enough for sharks to have evolved to eat us. There's a reason they eat seals and sea lions. It's because they need a blubber-rich diet to be able to survive. That's why they sometimes scavenge on whales. We really don't have that kind of blubber on us to be able to sustain a shark, to be able to feed like that. I think if a shark was to eat someone like me, it probably wouldn't even notice. What gets really amazing is that these sharks really do have so many opportunities to make mistakes, and yet they really are making so few of these mistakes. I think we have to make a choice about great white sharks. Either they are these terrifying, scary animals that swim around making mistakes, biting everything, or they're intelligent animals that know what they're doing, they know what food is, and they have very precise and calculated ways of exploring their environment. I'd like to introduce you to one more. And this is my favorite shark in the world. This is blackgill. I met blackgill in October 2014, and she instantly blew my mind. My friends are sick of me talking about blackgill. Blackgill is a similar size to Trix. She's a large shark, over 4 meters, but you couldn't get two sharks more different. While blackgill will never cruise from the left or from the right like Trix does, blackgill, everything is from the bottom and at speed. She shows you the raw power that a great white shark has. There's an electricity in the air on the boat when blackgill turns up because she really does show you how agile great white sharks are. She is an incredible shark. The truth is we haven't seen blackgill in Mossel Bay for about 3.5 years. That could be for a number of reasons. It could be that the long-lining boats that now come into Mossel Bay have taken out a lot of the smaller species of sharks, things like smooth hammerheads or smoothhounds, and the ecosystem might be slightly out of balance or even starting to collapse enough to not sustain food for a great white shark anymore. It might be that she's been caught by a trophy hunter or a poacher who can quite easily catch a great white shark and sell on her jaws for thousands of US dollars. It might be that she's ventured too close to the shores of Mozambique, a country that still very regularly catches sharks, slices their fins off to be sold in the shark fin soup trade, which is responsible for killing over 70 million sharks a year. Or it might be that she's been caught in a net, a beach net that's been put out deliberately to stop sharks from getting to an area where people like to swim. Now, these nets don't really do anything to actually stop sharks getting into those areas. They can swim over them, under them, round them, and most of the sharks caught in these nets are caught on their way back out into the ocean. Of course, these nets don't just kill sharks, they kill everything that swims in the ocean. Dolphins, turtles, rays, sometimes a baby humpback whale will get caught in these nets. I took this photo a couple of years ago of a tiger shark that had been caught in these nets, and I couldn't help but feel a great sense of injustice. This animal died purely because it was swimming in an area of the ocean that we now want to swim in. Its species has been there for over 400 million years, and yet now that we want to have our time in the ocean, they're not allowed to be there anymore. It really said a lot to me about our ability to coexist. Let me ask you, what's an acceptable number of turtles to drown in a shark net so that you can go swimming in a certain part of the ocean? Today I've told you about 3 different shark behaviours: mouthing, bumping, and spy hopping. All things that the media can very easily use in an article to make it out to be sharks are really terrifying, scary animals going around attacking everything. What I find really interesting is all 3 of those behaviours are mirrored by humans. A shark might mouth an object to try and figure out what it's made of, just like a toddler will crawl along the carpet, pick up an object, and put it in its mouth. A shark might bump into something, using all those senses in its snout to try and feel what something is made of. Just like when we get home a little bit late at night and we can't quite find the light switch, so we have to use our sense of touch. A shark might spy hop to get a better look of its surroundings, just like when we might get a little bit nosy and peep over the fence to try and see what our neighbours are up to. My aim is for everyone here, when next time you see a shark in the media, you look at it slightly differently. You have a closer look to see what's actually going on. Because when we stop dumbing these animals down to the mindless eating machines that they've been made out to be for so long, and we actually allow ourselves to understand them and even to respect them, that's when it leads to coexistence. Once we have a coexistence with this animal, that is then what leads us to want to protect it. And for me, it was very simple. I gave up eating seafood, I started filming them as much as I could, and I started talking about sharks to anyone that would listen. Sharks sit at the top of the marine food chain. They keep everything in balance, they keep the ocean healthy. And it's my hope that in 50 years' time, the great white shark is not just a thing of legend, but an animal that we have learnt to coexist with and continue to be in awe of. Thank you.